All right, take 5,329, the good one. Oh boy, guys, I've been working on this one for a long time, and it's it's been a real cautionary tale about adding new hardware to your system and trying to make videos based on it. That's what I get for thinking I'm going to pull something out of the box and be filming in an hour and a half. So anyways, 2 days later, here we are. We're at Inyo Kern, and the reason we're doing this video is I picked up a Tobii Eye Tracker, mostly for the head tracking. It does head and eye tracking. I don't need the eye tracking, and my screen is actually a little too big for eye tracking. It is interesting though, and we're going to use it a little bit in this video to show you some stuff. I used to have a Track IR a long time ago. I really liked it. If you're looking for head tracking and you want to keep it reasonably inexpensive, the Track IR is a great way to go. The reason I went with the Tobii is because it doesn't need anything on your head. The Track IR has reflectors and things that you need to attach to either your headset or a hat or whatever, so it can keep track of where you are. This one works just as good with nothing, but it does cost more to do that. And the main reason I did that, I think some of you know I have VR, but I don't like VR for long flights. It just gets uncomfortable. Anyways, enough about that. What I want to do today is I'm going to use the eye tracker to show you where I'm looking, and this is going to kind of reinforce what we talked about in the previous video about doing your approach with limited reference to instruments when you're doing visual flying. So we're going to get into that. I'm going to get the thing on screen here in a second. I probably won't use this feature too much in future videos. It's not 100% accurate on my screen because my screen is larger than what Tobii recommends, and so there's some tracking issues with it. So if you see that it looks like I'm looking somewhere that doesn't make sense, I'm probably looking at the nearest thing that does make sense, meaning that if I'm looking near a gauge but not at it, I'm probably looking at that gauge. If I'm looking at the cowling of the airplane, I'm probably actually looking at the horizon just slightly above the cowling. So take it with a grain of salt. It's more accurate on other people's systems. I've seen it done, but my rig's not other people's systems. The head tracking, I'm going to switch on now, and there we go. So now I can look around, see outside the cockpit, fly more like you would fly in the real world. I'll try not to overuse head movements. I know it can be a little distracting when you're trying to watch a video. Turn that off for a second here. Get rid of my yoke because I don't like that being there. Okay, so the other thing is the eyeball tracking thing, and turn that on right now. And that seems to be working. Okay, so let's get going. Brakes off. I want our air. There's basically no weather here at Ridgecrest today, so you don't get to watch me foible around too much. Turn the head tracking back on. At a weird angle. Airspeed to come up, and 55, rotate, let the plane accelerate, just like always. Working on trim. I think the field altitude here was 2,400 feet, so we'll go up to about 3,400. You'd think with all the flying I've been doing out of here the last few days, I'd have that known, but I don't know, playing with new technology, I forget to look at that kind of stuff. Bad pilot, bad. Alright. So, I'll get a turn to the east here down. I do know the runway heading is about 200, which helps me know approximately how to square up my corners. I was going to fly out of Camarillo this morning, but really socked in over there. So we'll use Ridgecrest where it's nice and clear. We're coming up to 3,400 feet now. Level off. Get our turn in. Let the airplane speed up a bit. One of the things I want to talk about also is I know that people, because I know this because I used to do it and I've heard lots of people talk about it, people look at the vertical situation of the VSI, and that's the gauge right below the altimeter for VFR, you really don't need that gauge. Don't use it. Oops, climbing a little too much here. And the reason why is that the VSI gives you an instantaneous picture of this moment right exactly now. It doesn't tell you what's really going on. It doesn't tell you about the trend over time, which is really more what we care about. If you've been assigned an altitude, say 3,500 feet, what's important is you're at 3,500 feet or within 50 feet of it either side. It doesn't matter if you're currently showing a little bit of a climb. That'll happen if you get turbulence or whatever else. So that's not a gauge that we refer to much flying VFR. You just use the altimeter and try to forget that that thing even exists. And what you can see is going on here, and what I've done is I'm watching the horizon, not the gauges. I know that the attitude indicator is pretty much on the horizon. I know that my altitude is pretty much staying where I want it. And that's really what's important. Get my slow the plane down now, and we're going to trim it. We're at 80, so we can get the first knots flaps down. Climbing a little bit, balloons a little bit when you put the flaps out. Ooh, the speed came way down. Alright, let's go ahead and make our turn. Let the nose come down so the speed will get back where we want it. You'll see me referring to the directional gyro because I don't, since there's no references out here in the desert, or at least none that I've learned yet. I'm using it to square up my pattern a little bit. Alright, and where's our airport? There's second notch flaps down. The Microsoft Flight Simulator, the Cessna doesn't glide like the real one. It flies a bit like a brick. You pull the throttle and it just comes right on down. The real Cessna trims out real nice at 70 and will fly for pretty good distance like that. And the sync rate's just kind of wrong. So I end up flying powered approaches more often than I would in the real plane. This is about how I like it. A little bit high, not terribly. Actually, we're just coming into the glide slope. Airspeed's about where I want it. A little bit. Yeah, that's all looking good. Filmed this video so many times. When I started out, I was still pretty sloppy. Now I'm getting tight. 5 hours of doing circuit work here. Well, here in Camarillo, but alright, and you'll see I go from the threshold to the far end of the runway. Okay, go ahead and throttle back up. And up we go. Get it back to 70 knots. Okay, I still have 2 notches of flaps in. Yeah, we'll pull first notch up. Second notch up. Turn that eyeball tracker off for a while. I know it can be distracting. I've watched a lot of playback trying to get these videos working. The next thing I want to cover real quick is getting into a little more depth on controlling the airplane visually, and this time I'm going to get into some of the maneuvers you would do if you were doing real world training, and specifically I'm going to do a little bit of slow flight. The purpose of doing that for practice is that it teaches you how the airplane's going to behave and what it feels like right near the edge of the envelope where you're, you know, at risk of stall or in the neighborhood of stall. And the reason it's important is that's a lot of the approach and landing, you know, you can get to that point. If you're not really familiar with what it feels like and you don't catch the other indications that you're creeping up on that, it can get really dangerous. So you get two things out of it. You get a little bit of a feel for how the airplane's going to behave should it ever be in that condition, and you get a little bit of a feel for how to control it, how to keep it where you want it in those conditions should it be necessary. So let me get the plane stabilized here a little bit. I'm going to try and stick to around 3,500. I haven't really done any of this type of maneuvering practice since I was flying real planes. It's not something I do in flight sim very often, so no promises on how pretty it's going to look, but I will show you basically how it gets done. I'm going to turn the eye indicator back on for you again, just so you can see how I'm doing this, which I will also describe. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is pull the throttle. We'll just set it about 2,000 for now. I ballooned up while I was doing that, so we'll let the altitude come down a bit. What we're going to do is trim, just trim the plane and try and get it to just kind of maintain your altitude while the airspeed comes down. We'll put in a notch of flaps. I think that was the first one. Yeah, well, it's one notch of flaps, 2 notches of flaps, and you can see we're slowing right on down. We're staying in the neighborhood of our altitude. As you get slower and slower, what will happen is you'll have to apply more and more power to maintain your altitude. Should be 3 notches in there now. Yeah, okay, so we're full flaps. Whoops, ballooned it a little bit when I look down again. And we're going 55. We can go a little slower than that. And so what you practice real world when you're doing this is climbing, descending, and turning. So right now I'm actually doing a bit of a descent. Trying to get back to 3,500. Ideally, I would be going a little bit slower than this, but I don't want to waste a lot of time. Okay. So we're going to let the speed come down. I want it right at the bottom of the green arc on the airspeed there. So about 50 knots. Let it go a little too far, so I'm adding throttle to get my altitude back. Still fiddling with trim. It's pretty good now. Okay, so here we are at 50, full flaps, a lot of power to maintain this, but once you've got it stabilized, and it does require a fair bit of rudder play too, but once you have it stabilized, then you can go ahead and try a turn. So we'll go ahead, just kind of memorize the visual picture outside, what it looks like to fly level, because you're going to want to know that as you start your turn. You want to keep the horizon about the same as it was, because that's really the indication that you're doing right. You may need to add a little throttle when you turn, because as you bring a wing down, you lose a small amount of lift. So a little extra power will make up for that. You don't really want to pull back on the yoke any, because you're already at minimum speed. You'd be risking a stall. So if you look at the turn coordinator down there, you want to keep the ball pretty much centered, which I'm a little off. And you want to keep the wing right on the index. And that'll give you a 2-minute turn. 2-minute turn just means it takes 2 minutes to do a full 360. Oops. Doing that wrong. Trying to get the ball centered up, and I just was thinking too hard. I'm going to use quite a lot of opposite rudder, honestly. Flight sim is so weird sometimes. Okay. Whatever. And let's try going back the other way. We gained a little altitude, so I'm going to back off a little bit. Still gaining. A little more bank angle than I want. Pull that back. Anyway, you get the idea on how that's done. And it's good practice if you want to improve your actual airmanship as far as how well you handle different airplanes in the sim. It's worth doing. You do have to learn the numbers for each plane, or at least, you know, if you have the round gauges up, you have the colored indicators on the gauges, so you can go by those, or on the airspeed, I should say. We'll go ahead and pull the flaps up a bit. Come back, do another landing, and I'll leave you guys alone for the day. Once we're on the ground, I'll briefly touch on what I think about the Tobii, and so as always, we're a little high, and looking out the window, airspeed needs to come down once 65, 70, but right now I'm mostly just letting the airplane descend. A couple knots, so we can pull that couple knots out at the end. Another maneuver you could use for this is a forward slip, which is a cross-controlled thing. I'll explain it maybe in another video, but it helps you to lose a lot of altitude without picking up a lot of speed, and it can be very handy, but we're not really that far out of line right now, so there's not much point in doing it. And get more flaps in there will slow us down a bit. Speed's coming under control. Glide slope's looking good. Have to add a little power because for some reason Cessnas in Flight Sim don't glide. Whoa, a little glitch there in the tracking. I know what's causing that. Okay. Alright. Yeah, that glitch. I have one of my buttons on my throttle quadrant is glitching, and I think it's mapped to something that's causing that to happen. All right, so talking quickly about the Tobii, I like it. It works really nicely. Head track is good. I don't actually have to swing my head all the way around to look back there like I would in VR. You can add an accelerator, basically a magnifier onto it, so it's like I'm turning my head, I don't know, 45 degrees or so to look all the way backward. And I can look, under the wing, I can look down, I can check out, the fuel valves and junk like that. Airplanes that have overhead consoles, it's easy to just look up and mess with those, do whatever you need to do. I have a button map to disconnect it, because one of the things that happens, like if you're in flight and you're trying to click a button, if your head's moving at all, you get this thing where nothing wants to sit still. So what I can do is just look where I want to look. Well, actually, I thought I could just stop it where it was. When I turn it off, it returns to the default view, so I can use my controller to zoom in or do whatever I need to do, and then after I get done with that, I can turn head tracking back on, and I'm back in business. So it works really well. Anyways, that's it for today. Hope you found something useful in it. If there's anything I didn't cover that you think you wanted to know about, or if there's anything that I covered but there was questions you had and wanted to know more, by all means bring it up down in the comments. I'm happy to help you guys out as best as I can, either in a text response there, or maybe it leads to a new video, Anyways, have a good one, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.